Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be doing part 9 for Games I Wish Got Fan Translated. So if you've been watching these in order, then you pretty much know the whole intro from here, but in case this is your first one that you're seeing, well, I just gotta repeat everything all over again and just say that yes, this is just like a little wish list of games that I wish I could play one day that I think look really interesting. And as we all know, fan translations do not happen overnight, so I know these are games that probably might not happen for like a very long time, if at all, but it is something that I just like to showcase here and just be like, yeah, these are just cool looking Japan only games that I think would be pretty cool to play if I could actually read them. So let's just get moving right along, shall we? So the first one I want to mention here is on the Dreamcast, and that happens to be Dorado Gate. Yeah, not the road to El Dorado, but some other form of El Dorado. So this was an RPG series from Capcom of all people, and as you can see with the cover art, it's actually done by the same artist that did all the Final Fantasy and Vampire Hunter D artwork, which is fucking awesome. So it's a turn-based RPG with some really nice colorful graphics, but the one thing that's really interesting about it is that this game was split into 7 parts, and yes, all 7 games were released on the Dreamcast. Isn't that nutty? So if I had to compare this to another game, it's kind of like the Dot Hack series, where like once you beat one game, you can actually transfer your save data to the other game and you can just continue on like that, but only that this game did it first. And it has way more parts to it. In fact, I'm kind of surprised that they even managed to put like this many games from like 2000 to like 2001. Although I'm sure some of the parts are probably not very long games, but even still, it's a pretty fascinating concept that was very ambitionist, and I don't even know if like there even were supposed to be more parts than 7. There might have been more, but I don't know exactly how this thing ends, but still, even without all like the crazy like episodic shit going on, I do think that the game does look like a pretty solid turn-based RPG. Alright, and the next one we're going to be talking about here is on PS1, of course, and it's a game I actually have played once before, and that being Yu-Gi-Oh! Capsule Monsters Breed and Battle. So this is actually the very first Yu-Gi-Oh! Game ever made, and yeah, remember what I've said in like some of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Related videos that like a lot of the earlier Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, they did a lot of experimenting, where a lot of them didn't play like the traditional card game? Well, this is definitely the first. In fact, it's actually based after Season 0, which is pretty interesting. So what did Konami do with this Yu-Gi-Oh! Game? Well, it's pretty much like the Capsule Monsters game that did get released outside of Japan on PS2, but obviously way before that, but there is some very different mechanics that they have in this one. And one very unique feature that this game has is that it actually has like a pet simulation mode where you can actually breed like new monsters that you can actually use in battle, and it's actually very in-depth. Apparently even the guides that are up for this game don't even do it justice. Like there's like so much like stuff that goes into it, it's pretty crazy. And I would imagine that trying to translate all that would be very difficult to do, but if it ever happens, I can see this being a game that I can put a lot of time into, because from what I did play of it, it did seem pretty fun. It was just kind of a pain in the ass to like know what I was doing, because certain monsters have certain effects and, you know, can't really read it. But it is a very fascinating concept that does remind me of the old days of like I said, the experimental Yu-Gi-Oh! Games. And next we have yet another PS1 game, and that happens to be Treasure Gear. Yeah, instead of Metal Gear, it's Treasure Gear. So anyways, this happens to be a roguelike RPG, but the one thing that's interesting about it is that it's actually a full-fledged action game that just happens to have randomly generated dungeons. Which is something you didn't see too often back in the day, because most of them were usually like, you know, everyone was moving around at the same time, and you would see like a feed that tells you like every action that you took, and you know, it kind of gives you the illusion that you're playing an action game, but it really is kind of turn-based. Not that I have a problem with games like that, but it's kind of nice to see one that's just like this, it's just full-fledged action. And yeah, despite the menus being in Japanese, the game is actually pretty playable, and I did play it for a little bit, and I have to say, I kind of liked what I played of it. So with knowing that, I can say that Treasure Gear is way better than Eternal Quest on PS2. Although being better than Eternal Quest is not really hard to do, but yeah, fuck that game. Yeah, I know, I have to dogpile on the game every time I can, but, I mean, could you blame me? But anyways, yeah, this game actually does look really cool from what I played of it, and yeah, I would like to play more of it one day. And next up we got a PS2 game, and that happens to be Code Age Commanders. Yeah, kind of a generic title, but I have to say, this game does look kinda interesting to me. So, it is developed by Square Enix, and here's the thing. The game originally was supposed to come out over here. It was actually shown at one of the E3s of 2006, but then nothing came of it. And it is an action RPG, and one thing I did found to be interesting was that I've heard one website say that this game kinda plays similar to the Dynasty Warriors series, and I thought that was kinda neat, because that is a series I do like after all. And it looks like it has like a really nice like futuristic style to it that I actually really like. Now, I haven't tested this game out myself, but there is a chance that it maybe might be playable without knowing Japanese, but I think there is a chance that it probably would be best to just wait on one because, you know, if this game is like a Dynasty Warrior type of game, it might be hard to figure out exactly like what your exact objective would be. But out of all the Square Enix games that have came out within the mid-2000s though, this is one that I rarely hear people ever talk about. In fact, I actually didn't even know about until like a few months ago. So pretty interesting to know that Square Enix made a hack and slash before like the Final Fantasy series turned into an action RPG. And next we got a tactical RPG on PS1 called Guardian Recall. So from what I've looked up with the story of this game, apparently it's about like some girls that like are being attacked by an evil organization and they have the power to summon guardians. Now when they mean summon a guardian to help them, do they mean like, you know, a persona or like a stand as in like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? I don't know, but I hope it would be like that because that'd be fucking cool. But yeah, this tactical strategy RPG does have a really cool art style that I really like all like the settings look really nice, I like the character sprites, and the character portraits also look really good too. In some ways, it does sort of remind me of another game that I've talked about in a previous episode. I think it was called like Angel Blade, and no, not related to the hentai, but no, it's just some other like tactical RPG. But both games still look really nice, and I would like to play either one of them. So next up we have is The Fear on PS2. So this is yet another live action type game with a horror setting. And this one has a plot that does seem pretty basic, where pretty much a bunch of Japanese filmmakers decide to like do some videos in some haunted house, and of course, everything goes wrong. So think of that Japanese horror film from the 70s called House, but only that if it wasn't nearly as trippy. Well, I don't know, there might be some trippy moments in this game, I'm not 100% sure, but from what I've seen of it though, it does look pretty fascinating to me. But one thing I found to be very impressive with this game, from what I've seen, is that even for an FMV game, you actually do have quite a bit of control within the game, and the transitions look really well done too. And another thing that I found to be kind of impressive was that the game is actually on 4 discs. Yeah, 4 DVD discs on a PS2. I don't even think many RPGs on PS2 have 4 discs. But when it comes to translating a game like this, the one thing I'm unsure on is like, how do subtitles work? Like, do adding in subtitles, like, is that easier than actually changing Japanese text? I'm not 100% sure, but anyone who has ever like done this type of stuff can let me know. But if it is easier to do, then I can definitely see a game like this happening sooner than some of the other ones that I've mentioned over the times. But yeah, one last thing to mention on this game is that you gotta leave it to Enix for putting out some very fascinatingly weird FMV type games. And next up we have is a PC98 game, and that happens to be The Ballad of Maria. So this is a visual novel detective type game that takes place in the United States. So it's a Japanese-made game that is based in America, and it's all about a bunch of murderers that are happening all over the place within Boston. And as you know me, when it comes to PC98 games, I really love the way this game looks. And from what I've heard of the music, it's also really good too. And just like another PC98 visual novel that's kind of horror related, called Dead of the Brain, this game's also pretty damn violent and has a lot of like gory scenes as well. In fact, it's actually made by the same company, Fairy Tail. And it seems like that they've done quite a few different horror themed visual novel type of games, so yeah, there is some pretty cool looking ones that I've also seen from them, like Necronomicon, and there is also a Dracula game. So yeah, any of these types of games though, I would like to play one day for sure. And next up, we have a very unique premise for a game called Mermaidoid. So this happens to be a turn-based RPG, and you play as a mermaid, so everything takes place underwater. Not something you see very often. And it also has a very interesting aesthetic to it. In fact, one thing that I actually didn't know about this until just a moment ago was that this game is actually based after an anime, and it's one that I've never heard of called Legend of the Deep Sea Mermaidoid. And it's only 24 episodes long, so I maybe might have to check that out at some point. Unfortunately, I can't say a whole lot else other than this, but like I said, a pretty cool concept that you really don't see very often for an RPG. Actually, I don't think I could ever think about any other RPG game that takes place entirely underwater. Unless there is, and maybe I'm just forgetting about it, but either way, it's yet another interestingly weird PS1 game that I just don't think could ever be duplicated from here on out. Alright, and next up we have a Sega CD game, and that happens to be a game based after the anime series 3x 3 Eyes, or 3 times 3 Eyes. I don't know the exact way how they actually want you to say it, but you know, 3x 3 Eyes, there you go. It's a horror themed anime that I always wanted to sit down and watch, but just never really got around to it, but maybe one day. But it always did fascinate me though. And there's quite a few games that are based after this series, and a lot of them seem to be pretty different, but this one I think looks the most interesting to me that hasn't been done yet, because this one is a turn-based RPG, and a pretty cool looking one on that. And apparently it follows the story really well, while also adding in some new unique stuff to it, which I think is very nice. So if you really like the series but didn't know there was any video games based after it, then this is one that you might have to keep your eyes open on. Alright, and as for the last game that I'm going to be mentioning in this episode, so this is a game that is released on a console that I have yet to talk about within this Games I Wish Got Fan Translated series, and that happens to be the Xbox. So, knowing this, I can see that this is a game that would probably take a very long time to do because, you know, Xbox emulation still isn't even up to snuff yet. But I thought the game looked pretty cool looking, so I figured I might as well talk about it because, you know, who else is talking about it? And that happens to be Tenorizia. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it, but this is the title of it right here. So it is an action RPG with an anime style that I think looks kinda nice. In fact, it's kinda funny just to see such an anime looking game on a cover art for the original Xbox. Now I assume you all know that the Xbox in Japan, especially the original one, was actually very niche, so it didn't really get a crazy amount of games released on it, and when I was looking through the list of Japanese only Xbox games, I did find a couple that did look kinda interesting, but I think this one looks the most interesting to me. And judging by the way that it looks, it does sort of remind me of one of those Atelier games if it was a full-fledged action RPG, and it's kinda hard to find some info on it, so unfortunately I can't say a whole lot about the game, but I do think it is quite fascinating that the Xbox get a game like this. And it actually looks pretty fun too, but of course, I'm just judging just by the way it looks. It does look fun. And for those of you that were able to import Xbox games, I'm pretty sure this one might be a little bit tough to find. Because I've noticed that a lot of original Xbox games in Japan, every time I've seen videos of stores, they never really seem to have a lot. But yeah, maybe I might have to talk about a couple other Xbox only games in this series. And that's all it is for this episode. So as always, what are some games that you wish got fan translated that I haven't mentioned yet? Or if you manage to play any of these games or know any additional info about them that I didn't mention, then feel free to do so. So with that said, thanks for watching, commenting, and have yourselves a great day.